We've said, let's take some existing art and see how this fits. So yeah, we'll grab some headcrabs, we'll grab the machine guns from Half-Life, the rocket launchers, all those different things, and see how they play in virtual reality. But right now, it's a tool for exploring the different kinds of game designs we want to do. We're not saying no to a Half-Life VR, but we don't know what's the right thing yet. Our most precious resource is time, and we don't have enough time for people to do everything. Would we like to make all our franchises in VR? Absolutely. But we don't have enough time or people, so we have to figure out what's the best fit and what plays to the strengths of VR. Is Half-Life a good fit? Is Left 4 Dead a good fit? Is a new franchise a good fit? I don't know yet. We really are trying to cover the broad spectrum of what we can do, and then we'll start focusing on spearheading that. End quote. Jeet Barnett, longtime programmer and co-creator of Portal, told this to Kotaku in March of 2015. It's around this time that the first generation of Steam VR headsets were being prototyped following the decoupling of Oculus and Valve. The internal software development team was working on the demos that would become the lab, and of them, one was never seen publicly. Based around Half-Life 2 and having the player battle familiar enemies in familiar locations. I've discussed this at length in a previous video, however, what needs to be stressed is how the basics of this cut lab demo mutated late in 2015 into a full-fledged game. It's also around this time that former HTC CEO Chair Wang stated in an interview with the BBC that HTC and Valve were, quote, cooperating on Half-Life. It's also known that around this time, things like the cut lab demo were around, but as Jeep stated, nothing was concrete, or so Valve wanted the public to believe. As in February of 2016, the Steam VR test bench demo went live, a program that checked if a user's system was powerful enough to run a virtual reality headset. The tool ran a scripted version of Valve's own Robot Repair VR demo itself, running in Source 2, and what some in the community found was unsecure. Once again, I've made a previous report on this, but what's important is that this version of the software leaked, which included thousands of unreleased VR assets. Some, such as a Half-Life demo called Strider Canyon, showed that Half-Life development might have been a bit more concrete than originally stated, as all of these leaked files were from July of 2015 or earlier. Furthermore, in June of 2016, Valve released Destinations, a Source 2 program then focused on photogrammetry postcards. Digging through the files revealed much related to Half-Life 3 and other unreleased Source 2 projects. However, what's most important is that the Destinations data mine resulted in the acronym HLVR for the first time. No one knew exactly what it was. A testbed? A demo? Something cancelled? It didn't matter, because we had our first string leaks related to this unknown project and the speculation began. In February of 2017, while visiting Valve, Gabe Newell told me directly that Valve was then working on 3 full-length VR projects. However, when asked about HLVR specifically, he declined to comment. I've since figured out what those 3 VR games were, and when I've finished that report, a card will be in it in the corner. What followed the 3 VR games claim was nearly 3 years of string leaks. Essentially, all of Valve's projects share code between them when using the same engine. For example, for a long time, it was normal to find TF2 code in Source Filmmaker, obviously both running on the Source engine. Well, since HLVR, a Source 2 project, was being worked on, other Source 2 projects usually held code from it. So, for example, when Dota 2 got a large patch, strings from HLVR could likely be found. This was the case for all Source 2 projects. So for nearly 4 years, I have dug through the patches of Dota 2, Destinations, Steam VR Home, Artifact, and Underlords, and have found thousands of small pieces of HLVR's design. I then organized it, outlined it, and ended up with a game design document that explains exactly what Valve's flagship VR game is. When the Index was first announced, a press event was held at Valve, and when asked about any Valve VR titles, Gabe Newell stated that there would be a, quote, flagship VR title in 2019. That title is a single-player, story-driven, linear VR first-person shooter set in the Half-Life universe. You play as Alyx Vance, sometime in the 20-year time gap between the events of Half-Life 1 and 2. HLVR is the game. The flagship VR title that Gabe Newell told the press about is HLVR. Through most of its development, HLVR was teleport only. For much of Valve's early VR marketing, people like Chet Falasek would champion champion the phrase, never move the player. And for much of HLVR's life, it followed this mantra. Imagine the movement system seen in the lab or SteamVR Home polished up. It's similar to that. Now, for a time, teleporting was connected directly with the player's ability to take cover, and would need time to recharge. The distance, frequency, and ability to teleport could be changed based on the player's proximity to enemies. That said, in recent times, the team has taken a different approach, allowing for many of the popular locomotion options, including smooth. Now, with that said, much of the level design from this previous period still exists in the game, and was created with teleport only in mind. So how this will affect gameplay has yet to be seen. At one point, HLVR was what was known as a floating hands game, meaning as far as the player's physics went, there really weren't any. And aside from the hands themselves, the player had no visual body. The player hands would phase through all objects in geometry and generally behaved much like you would see in the lab or SteamVR Home. In recent times, however, due to the changing expectations of virtual reality and the rise of popularity of other physics-based games, it appears some semblance of physics have been added into HLVR. Players also have a group of tools at their disposal to make VR life easier, such as a flashlight being its own entity that the player holds, a multi-tool being the multi-tool seen in Half-Life 2. This is Alyx's tool used to unlock Combine doors, hack computers, store information, reprogram robots, and much more. And lastly, the gravity gloves. It's a set of gloves that take the place of the gravity gun. These allow you to pull items to your hands without the need of bending over, as well as launching objects a great distance based on the object's mass and the player's abilities. Ever played Blades and Sorcery? It's just like that. All of these will be attached to your person in a realistic inventory system for all of the mechanics, as well as grenades and clips. While playing, the levels should look familiar, as long as you've played Half-Life games before. The major difference here is that every interaction has been designed to take advantage of 12 years of technological progress, as well as play to the strengths of the virtual reality platform. Think about Vertigo 2, Doom VFR, and budget cuts having a baby, with the largest budget you've yet seen for virtual reality and the best art you have ever seen for a game. So, for example, Source 2 now supports level streaming, so instead of halting flow every few moments to load the next map, the entire experience is seamless. So, Source 2 also supports destruction of level geometry through forceful input from the VR player. Everything is meticulously detailed. Anything in the world was put there for a reason and was polished to a point where it feels like the natural interaction while maintaining a high bar for player VR comfort. On September 14th, 2019, HLVR designer Carrie Davis gave a talk at DigiPen regarding tips for virtual reality development. Long story short, the talk boiled down to about half an hour discussing the specifics of a door's design and all of the iteration and polish the team had to go through to achieve such a comfortable yet realistic implementation. This level of polish is seen throughout the entire game, and the purpose of all of the door talk was not to show off doors specifically, but instead to illustrate how detailed the team is taking their creation. Imagine the most detailed and realistic looking city yet seen in virtual reality, and realize that every piece of that city went through just as much, if not more, playtesting and iteration as the doors. For example, Source 2 allows for basic simulated thermodynamics, allowing for the player to play Avatar and control the elements in a realistic way. You also have obsessively detailed in-game screens with fine control over scan lines, screen curve, as well as each screen allowing for a pseudo VSync. There is procedural glass shattering, as well as a day-night cycle so detailed that it changes the world environment states based on the phases of the moon. The combat section and levels will also be shaken up with the addition of virtual reality cover and VR stealth. For cover, it's self-explanatory. However, for stealth, every object has a visibility and smell state, and based on the locations of different objects, the player can move freely. The weapon set of HLVR is smaller than most Half-Life games. However, each of the weapons seen is far more detailed than anything previous. Weapons take direct interaction to aim, load, reload, and shoot, and each weapon can be upgraded using additions. Think of Doom 2016's system, only in VR. These add-ons can be found within the world or crafted. As for the weapons themselves, the player will have access to pistols, shotguns, rapid-fire SMGs, energy guns, grenades, and melees. Each of these weapon classes can be found throughout gameplay in the environments or off of fallen enemies, and may take on different visual appearances to shake things up, but mechanically, they're going to be the same. For melees, the obvious is a crowbar, but the player can use most objects in the world as a weapon. Grenades are known to come in 3 or more flavors. The ones known are HE grenades, trip mines, and Zen grenades. Exactly what a Zen grenade is still unknown. As for these weapon additions, the player will have access to speed loaders, speed shooters, and grenade launchers, along with much else that's currently unknown. With the grenade grenade launchers actually using the legitimate grenades found within the world and in your inventory. Now, as for the enemies you will be facing, there will be some returning faces, such as Antlions, Vortigons, the Combine, and Civil Protection, with head crabs coming in 2 new variations, being smoke and spit crabs, and zombies also possibly being blind, going only by the smell to find the player. You also have some new enemy types, such as the Reviver, who, like an Archvile from Doom, can run around the map and revive downed enemies with electricity. HLVR originally was set to be released Christmas of 2018 alongside the Valve Index. However, as we all know, Valve time. So now the team plans on announcing the game a few months prior to release in an attempt to saturate the market with VR headsets in the lead up. Remember, HLVR will be compatible with everything that works with Steam VR. So many people getting into VR for the first time at the low end just to play the first Half-Life game in 12 years? Valve wants that, and they're planning for it. So sometime between now and the end of the year, a trailer will release for HLVR that will serve a few purposes. For one, it will look like a VR game anyone can play. As stated before, Valve is expecting this title to possibly be the first VR experience of many, so player comfort is a top priority. Mechanically, it lands in the middle between the lab and Boneworks, with HLVR being more like a Disney dark ride and Boneworks being more like Top Thrill Dragster. Second, Valve realizes that they will announce the first Half-Life game of 12 years to be exclusive to virtual reality, and they will cause some fan anger. So their plan is to win you over with nostalgia and graphics. HLVR is a prequel to Half-Life 2, using Source 2 to its full power. So not only will Half-Life fans like myself be tearing up when they see Dr. Kleiner, Barney, G-Man, and many others saying and doing new things, they will be looking the best we've ever seen them. Instead of people being mad that the game is in VR, people will be mad they can't get VR any sooner. The game is close to photorealistic, and without a doubt is the single best looking VR game yet seen. Not only that, but Valve is planning on addressing all major VR concerns with this game. The game isn't just a few hour experience. This is a long 12 to 16 hour game. The team also wants to incentivize replays by turning up the mechanical heat and introducing new mechanics to really get people playing multiple times. Lastly, the game will be a nostalgia fest, showing players memorable locale in Source 2's level graphics. And the player even goes and visits Zen. Valve's goal with making this game is to create the killer app that sets the expected quality bar for all other virtual reality games and creates market saturation with VR headsets. The most asked question I get is if HLVR will have a non-VR mode. No, it won't. That would defeat the purpose of this game existing in the first place. The game has actually been made in order to, quote, break Valve time and create a Half-Life game as fast as possible. And thus far, they actually have been doing that, because most of the R&D and development time has been spent working on VR interactions and the actual VR engine. However, there's a far more important reason for all of this. All of this work being done, polishing and playtesting every object in the entire game, would sort of be a waste if it was only used in one game. What if HLVR did well? Could Valve make another game faster now that a lot of the deep mechanical work is now finished? Could HLVR be to VR as Half-Life 2 was to first-person shooters? Even more important, what if Valve released their VR development tools with all of this mechanical and visual work already completed, and just let the community create what they wanted? Instead of every indie VR developer needing to come up with their own systems, Valve could allow thousands of high-end VR experiences to be created easily, in the same way that mods were being created for Half-Life 1 and 2. Valve could create the de facto VR game engine and release it to the public free of charge. Imagine if this actually created a community modding boom, not unlike those seen in Half-Life 1's days, and Valve could actually start hiring the brightest from that group again. Valve loves and has based their entire company on user-generated content, and now feels like the perfect time to not only saturate the market with hardware, but also saturate the market with high-end VR software based entirely on their work. If Valve goes through with their plan to release their tools to the public, HLVR would be more than its campaign. It would be its mods as well. If you want to be able to follow up on all of the topics I cover on this channel in real time, check out my Twitter page linked down in the description below. It's at Valve News Network, no K. If you have a question about anything, if you're confused about anything, check out my email, tylermcvicker@yahoo.com, or my DMs on Twitter are always open. If you want to support videos like this, my Patreon page is down in the description below, and thank you very much for watching. I'm Tyler McVicker, this is Valve News Network. Have a good day. Adios.